The Silent Advantage, Part 1. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone said something that really got under your skin? Maybe it was a comment at work, a text from a family member, or just some random person who cut you off in traffic. What did you do? Did you fire back immediately? Did you feel that heat rising in your chest, that urge to set things straight right then and there? Yeah, I've been there too. We all have. But here's what I've learned, and what I want to share with you today. The people who truly win in life, the ones who seem to glide through challenges while the rest of us are drowning in drama, they all have one thing in common. They've mastered something so simple yet so powerful that it changes everything. They've learned the art of being calm when everyone else is losing their minds. This isn't about being passive. This isn't about letting people walk all over you. This is about something far more powerful. This is about understanding that in a world that rewards the loudest voice, the sharpest comeback, the quickest reaction, there's actually a completely different path to power. The silent advantage. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share 6 powerful lessons that completely transformed how I approach life. These aren't theories from some textbook. These are real, practical insights that you can start using today. And I promise you, once you understand these principles, you'll never see conflict, stress, or challenges the same way again. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive deep into this together. Lesson 1. Respond. Don't react. Picture this scenario. You're scrolling through your phone during lunch break, and you see a group chat message from your gym buddy. He's posted screenshots of a private conversation you had with him about struggling with your fitness goals. He's making jokes about it. Other people are laughing, adding their own comments. Your personal struggle is now entertainment for a dozen people. What do you feel in that moment? Your stomach drops. Your face gets hot. Every instinct in your body is screaming at you to type something back, to defend yourself, to make him feel as small as he just made you feel. Your fingers are already moving toward the keyboard. That's a reaction. A reaction is what happens when your emotions grab the steering wheel and floor the gas pedal. It's that message you type with shaking hands and send before you've even finished reading it. It's the voicemail you leave at 2 a.m. that you desperately wish you could delete by sunrise. It's the decision you make when your heart rate is through the roof and your logical mind has completely checked out. And here's the brutal truth about reactions. They feel powerful in the moment, but they make you weak in the long run. Think about it. When you react emotionally to someone, you're essentially handing them remote control to your emotions. They push a button, you respond exactly as predicted. They say something mean, you get angry. They criticize you, you get defensive. They ignore you, you chase them. You become predictable. You become controllable. I learned this lesson in one of the most painful ways possible. A few years back, I was working at this startup. Small team, big dreams, everyone working crazy hours. There was this one developer, let's call him Marcus, who had this way of undermining everything I said in meetings. If I suggested we go left, he'd argue for right. If I presented data supporting an idea, he'd find some obscure counterpoint. It was like he made it his personal mission to make me look incompetent. One Tuesday afternoon, we were in a strategy meeting with potential investors. High stakes. Everyone was on edge. I presented a marketing approach I'd been developing for weeks. Before I could even finish, Marcus interrupted. He didn't just disagree. He basically called my entire strategy naive and short-sighted. In front of investors, in front of our CEO, something in me snapped. I didn't yell, I didn't curse, but I responded with this cold, cutting energy. I pointed out every mistake Marcus had made in the past 3 months. I questioned his competence. I made him look small. And for about 30 seconds, I felt victorious. I had won. Except I hadn't won anything. The investors looked uncomfortable. The CEO looked disappointed. And Marcus? He had succeeded in exactly what he wanted. He got me to lose my composure. He pushed a button, and I danced exactly as expected. That meeting cost us the investment. Not because of Marcus's criticism, but because of my reaction to it. The investors didn't want to back a team that couldn't handle internal conflict professionally. I went home that night, replaying the whole thing in my head, and I realized something crucial. Marcus didn't make me react that way. I chose to. He threw the bait, but I'm the one who bit. That's when I started learning the difference between reacting and responding. A response is different. A response is what happens when you create space between the trigger and your action. It's when you feel that surge of emotion, but don't immediately act on it. It's when you pause, breathe, and then choose your next move based on what serves you best, not what feels good in the moment. Let me go back to that gym chat scenario. A reaction would be to fire off an angry message, leave the group, or worse, screenshot and blast him publicly. It would feel justified. It would feel like you're standing up for yourself. But what does that actually accomplish? The damage is done. The screenshots are out there. Now you've added more drama to the situation. You've shown everyone that you're easily shaken, and you've given that person exactly what they wanted: a reaction. A response would look different. A response might be taking a few hours to process how you feel, maybe reaching out to that person privately. Hey, I saw what you posted. That was a private conversation, and sharing it without asking felt like a betrayal of trust. I need some time to think about our friendship. Or maybe, depending on the situation, the response is simply removing yourself from that group and that friendship without any explanation. Sometimes the most powerful response is silence and distance. See the difference? One is driven by emotion. The other is driven by intention. When you react, you're playing defense. When you respond, you're playing chess. Here's what I started doing after that disastrous investor meeting. Before I respond to anything that triggers me, I ask myself 3 questions. 1. Is this worth my energy? Not everything deserves a response. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Some people aren't worth educating. Some situations will resolve themselves if you just give them space. 2. What's my goal here? Am I responding because I want to solve a problem, or because I want to feel better? If it's just to feel better, that's a reaction in disguise. 3. Will I regret this tomorrow? If there's even a chance the answer is yes, I wait. I sit with it. I let the emotional charge dissipate. This practice changed everything for me. I started noticing that most things I wanted to react to weren't actually that important. They just felt important in the moment because they triggered my ego. Someone cut me off in traffic. 5 minutes later, I won't even remember their face. Why give them free real estate in my head for the rest of the day? Someone left a nasty comment on my social media. They don't know me. Their opinion is based on a two-dimensional version of me they created in their head. Why should I care? A colleague took credit for my idea. Okay, that one still stings. But responding with anger only makes me look petty. A better response? Documenting my work, calmly raising the issue with my manager privately, and making sure I'm more strategic about sharing ideas before they're fully formed. The pattern I discovered is this. Reactive people are predictable. Responsive people are powerful. When you're reactive, people know exactly how to push your buttons. They can manipulate you. They can control the narrative. They can make you dance like a puppet because they know which strings to pull. When you're responsive, you become unpredictable in the best way. People can't figure you out. They can't control you. They try to provoke you, and you just don't take the bait. That calm, that self-control, it makes them uncomfortable. It shifts the power dynamic entirely. I saw this play out beautifully about 6 months after that investor meeting incident. There was a new project, and Marcus was at it again, trying to undermine my contributions in a team call. But this time, I didn't bite. I listened to his criticism, paused, and said, "That's an interesting perspective, Marcus. I'll take that into consideration." Then I moved on. No defensiveness, no counterattack, just acknowledgement and moving forward. You know what happened? Marcus looked confused. He tried again, pushing harder, but I maintained that same calm energy. And something shifted. The rest of the team started noticing that I wasn't getting rattled. They started seeing his behavior for what it was, unnecessary antagonism. Within a few weeks, people started tuning him out when he went on his critical tangents. I didn't defeat Marcus by fighting him. I defeated him by refusing to fight. That's the power of responding instead of reacting. You take away the other person's ammunition. You refuse to play the game they're trying to drag you into. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. It's not, especially at first. Your ego will scream at you. It'll tell you that staying calm means you're weak, that you're letting people disrespect you, that you need to stand up for yourself. But here's the truth your ego doesn't want you to know. True strength isn't in the reaction, it's in the restraint. Anyone can yell, anyone can lash out, anyone can send that angry text. That's easy. That's the default setting for most humans. What's hard is feeling all that rage, all that hurt, all that frustration, and choosing not to act on it. What's hard is maintaining your composure when everything in you wants to explode. What's hard is taking the high road when the low road seems so much more satisfying.
But that difficulty, that's where your power lives. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you're building a muscle. You're training your brain to stay in control, even when everything feels out of control. You're proving to yourself that you're not at the mercy of your emotions or anyone else's behavior. Let me give you a practical tool that helped me develop this skill. It's stupidly simple, but it works. The 10-second rule. When something triggers you,
When you feel that urge to react, count to 10. That's it. Just 10 seconds. Don't say anything. Don't type anything. Just breathe and count. 10 seconds doesn't sound like much, but it's enough for that initial spike of emotion to start coming down. It's enough for your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, to start coming back online. It's enough for you to remember that you have a choice. Sometimes, after those 10 seconds, you'll realize you don't even want to respond anymore. The trigger doesn't have the same charge. You've already moved past it. Other times, you'll respond, but it'll be measured, thoughtful, strategic. It'll be a response that serves you instead of satisfying your ego. I started with 10 seconds. Then I graduated to 10 minutes for bigger triggers. Now, for really significant things, I give myself 24 hours before I respond. That waiting period has saved me from so many stupid decisions I can't even count. Here's what I want you to do. Understand. When you master the art of responding instead of reacting, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're fundamentally changing your relationship with the world. You stop being a victim of circumstances. You stop being controlled by other people's behavior. You stop giving away your peace to anyone who knows which buttons to push. Instead, you become the eye of the storm. Chaos can swirl around you, but you remain centered, calm, collected, in control. And people notice. They start trusting you more. They start coming to you when things get difficult because they know you won't panic. They start respecting you differently because you've shown that you can't be easily shaken. Your relationships improve because you're not constantly in defensive mode. Your career advances because you're seen as someone who can handle pressure. Your self-respect grows because you're proving to yourself every single day that you're in control of your own life. This is the foundation of the silent advantage. Before you can harness the power of silence, before you can use calm as a weapon, before you can confuse your opponents with your composure, you need to master this first lesson. Respond, don't react. Feel everything. Acknowledge the emotion, honor the trigger, but don't let it control you. Create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you'll find your power. I promise you, once you make this shift, you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. The drama will decrease. The stress will reduce. The clarity will increase. And you'll start seeing opportunities where you used to only see obstacles. But this is just the beginning, because once you stop wasting energy on reactions, you free up something incredibly valuable. And that brings us to our second lesson. Lesson 2, saving energy. All right, let's talk about something that took me way too long to figure out. Something that, once I understood it, completely changed how I approach every single day. Energy management. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is going to be some boring lecture about vitamins and sleep schedules, hear me out. Because what I'm about to share has nothing to do with your morning routine or your diet, and everything to do with why you feel completely drained at the end of the day, even when you haven't actually done that much. Let me paint you a picture. It's a regular Wednesday. You wake up with decent energy. You didn't sleep amazing, but you didn't sleep terribly either. You grab your coffee, you check your phone, and already there's a thread of messages in the family group chat. Your aunt is complaining about politics. Your cousin is sharing conspiracy theories. Someone's arguing about which restaurant to pick for the upcoming reunion. You want to ignore it, but you can't help yourself. You read through all 37 messages. You feel yourself getting irritated. You type out a response, delete it, type another one. You're not even at work yet, and you're already annoyed. You get to the office. Your inbox has 63 emails. 40 of them are complete nonsense. But you read through each one anyway, getting progressively more frustrated with every "just circling back" and "per my last email." Then there's the meeting, the one that could have been an email. Someone on the team keeps interrupting with irrelevant points. You're not even directly involved in the argument, but you can feel your blood pressure rising just listening to it. Lunchtime comes. You're scrolling through social media while eating your sad desk salad. Someone you went to high school with just posted about their new promotion, their perfect relationship, their amazing vacation. You don't even like this person, but somehow their success makes you feel behind in life. You spend the next 20 minutes mentally comparing your life to theirs. Afternoon hits. A coworker makes a passive-aggressive comment about a project you're working on. It's subtle, but you catch it. You spend the next hour mentally crafting the perfect comeback, imagining exactly how you'll put them in their place next time. By the time you get home, you're exhausted, completely wiped out. But here's the weird part. You didn't actually do anything that physically demanding. You attended meetings. You answered emails. You had conversations. So why do you feel like you just ran a marathon? Because you spent your entire day bleeding energy. And most of that energy wasn't lost to work. It was lost to emotional friction, to arguments that didn't matter, to comparisons that served no purpose, to hypothetical confrontations that never happened, to worrying about things you can't control. This was my life for years, and I didn't even realize it. I thought being tired was just part of being an adult. I thought everyone felt this drained all the time. I thought I just needed to push through it, maybe drink more coffee, maybe try to squeeze in a workout. But then something happened that completely shifted my perspective. I went on a solo camping trip. 3 days in the mountains, completely disconnected. No phone service, no internet. Just me, nature, and a lot of silence. And here's what I noticed. By the second day, I had more energy than I'd had in months. I was hiking for hours, setting up camp, cooking over a fire, doing all these physically demanding tasks. And yet, I felt more alive, more energized, more present than I had sitting at my desk doing nothing. That's when it clicked. The exhaustion I'd been feeling wasn't physical, it was emotional and mental. I'd been spending years unconsciously draining my energy tank on things that didn't deserve a single drop. Think about what happens in your body when you get angry. Your heart rate spikes, your blood pressure rises, cortisol floods your system, your muscles tense up, your breathing becomes shallow, your entire body goes into fight or flight mode, as if you're facing actual physical danger. Except you're not facing a tiger. You're facing a rude email, or an annoying comment, or a friend who canceled plans last minute. Your body is preparing for a battle that doesn't exist, burning through energy at an alarming rate for absolutely no reason. And it's not just anger. Anxiety works the same way. Every time you spiral into what if thinking, every time you replay an awkward conversation from 3 years ago, every time you worry about something that might never happen, your body responds as if it's real, as if the threat is happening right now. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one, so it treats them the same, and that treatment costs you energy. Here's what blew my mind. Scientists estimate that worrying about the future and ruminating about the past consumes up to 50% of our daily mental energy. 50%. Half of your energy tank gone before you even tackle the things that actually matter. Think about that. You wake up with, let's say, 100 units of energy. By the time you've scrolled through your phone for 20 minutes, gotten annoyed by the news, worried about your finances, and replayed yesterday's embarrassing moment, you're already down to 50 units. And the day hasn't even started yet. Now you're trying to focus on important work, trying to be creative, trying to solve problems, trying to be present with the people you care about, but you're running on half a tank. And then you wonder why everything feels so hard. I started experimenting with this after my camping revelation. I started paying attention to what actually drained my energy versus what gave me energy. And I noticed something fascinating. The things that drained me most weren't the hard things. They were the unnecessary things. Working on a challenging project that required deep focus, that actually gave me energy. Even if it was mentally demanding, there was this flow state that left me feeling accomplished and alive. But getting into a pointless argument on social media about whether pineapple belongs on pizza? Absolutely devastating to my energy levels. 30 minutes of that, and I felt like I needed a nap. Having a difficult but necessary conversation with a friend about a boundary I needed to set? Nerve-wracking, yes, but ultimately energizing because I was honoring myself. But complaining about my situation to anyone who would listen without actually doing anything to change it? Complete energy vampire. I'd feel worse after venting than I did before. I started to see a pattern. Energy isn't primarily lost through effort. It's lost through resistance. When you're angry at traffic, you're resisting reality. Traffic is what it is. Being angry about it doesn't make it move faster. It just makes you miserable and exhausted. When you're anxious about a presentation next week, you're resisting uncertainty. The presentation will happen whether you worry or not. Worrying doesn't prepare you. Practice prepares you. Worry just drains you. When you're resentful about someone's success, you're resisting their reality and yours. Their success doesn't diminish you. Their journey isn't your journey. But that resentment, that'll eat you alive from the inside. This realization changed everything for me. I started asking myself a simple question throughout the day. Is this worth my energy? Someone cuts me off in traffic? Not worth my energy. I'll literally never see that person again. Why would I give them 10 minutes of angry thoughts? A friend posts something political I disagree with? Not worth my energy. We've been friends for 15 years despite having different views. One social media post isn't going to change either of our minds. A colleague makes a snide remark in a meeting. Okay, this one might be worth my energy, but not right now, not emotionally. If it's a pattern, I'll address it strategically. If it's a one-off, I'll let it go. I started treating my energy like money, because that's essentially what it is. You have a limited amount, it regenerates slowly, and every expenditure is a choice. Would you give a stranger $50 just because they annoyed you? Of course not. But we give away 50 units of emotional energy all the time to people and situations that don't deserve it. Here's what I learned. Calm people aren't calm because they don't have problems. They're calm because they've learned to be ruthlessly selective about what gets their energy. Let me tell you about my friend Sarah. Sarah works in customer service, one of the most mentally draining jobs out there. She deals with angry, entitled, sometimes abusive customers all day long, every single day. I once asked her, "How do you not come home completely destroyed every night?" She smiled and said something I'll never forget. "I used to. For the first year, I'd come home and just collapse. I'd be irritable with my partner. I'd dread going to work. I'd feel this constant heaviness. But then I realized something. These people who are yelling at me, they're having the worst day of their lives. Or they're just miserable people. Their anger has nothing to do with me personally. So why would I carry it home? Why would I let someone who's miserable make me miserable too?" She continued, "Now, when someone yells at me, I see it for what it is. They're transferring their energy to me, hoping I'll take it and run with it. But I don't have to accept that transfer. I can let it bounce off. I can stay in my lane, solve what can be solved, and move on." Sarah had figured out something crucial. You can't control what people throw at you, but you can absolutely control whether you catch it. Think about it like this. Someone throws you a ball of anger. You have two choices. You can catch it, hold on to it, maybe even throw it back, starting a game of toxic catch that drains both of you. Or you can let it fly past you, Acknowledge that it was thrown, but don't engage with it. This doesn't mean you become a doormat. It means you become selective. Some balls are worth catching because they contain legitimate feedback or important information. But most are just people's unprocessed emotions looking for a landing spot. I started applying this everywhere. Family drama? Unless it directly involves me and requires my input, I'm not catching that ball. Office politics? Not my circus, not my monkeys. Someone trying to drag me into gossip? Hard pass. And here's what happened. I had so much more energy for the things that actually mattered. I could focus deeper on my work. I was more present with my partner. I had the bandwidth to pursue hobbies I'd abandoned years ago because I was too tired. Turns out, I wasn't too tired. I was just spending my energy budget on nonsense. But there's another layer to this that I need to share. Because it's not just about avoiding energy drains, it's about understanding where energy actually comes from. Most people think energy is something you have or don't have. Like, you wake up with X amount, and you spend it throughout the day, and when it's gone until you sleep. But that's not entirely true. Energy can be created. And it's created through alignment. When you're doing something that matters to you, energy appears. When you're spending time with people who genuinely care about you, energy appears. When you're working toward a goal you actually believe in, energy appears. I noticed this when I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I used to say yes to every social invitation, every favor, every request, because I didn't want to disappoint people or seem antisocial. But here's what that looked like in practice. I'd say yes to a Friday night hangout I didn't really want to attend. Then I'd spend all week dreading it, which drained my energy. Then I'd go, pretend to have fun, which drained more energy. Then I'd come home feeling like I wasted my evening, which triggered guilt and resentment, draining even more energy. One yes cost me energy 7 times over. When I started saying no to things that didn't align with me, something magical happened. Not only did I save the energy I would have spent on those activities, but I also freed up space for things that actually energized me. A quiet Friday night, reading a book I'd been wanting to read, that gave me energy. Working on a side project I was passionate about, energy. Having a deep conversation with one close friend instead of shallow small talk with 12 acquaintances, massive energy boost. This is what people miss. They think being calm and conserving energy means being inactive or passive, but it's the opposite. It means being so intentional with your energy that you have plenty left over for the things that light you up. Here's a practical framework I developed. I call it the energy audit. At the end of each day, I'd write down the top 5 things that took significant mental or emotional energy. Then I'd categorize them. Green, necessary and aligned with my values. Important work project, caring for a sick family member, having a difficult but needed conversation. Yellow, necessary but not aligned. Tedious administrative tasks, obligations I can't get out of yet. Red, neither necessary nor aligned. Scrolling social media for an hour, engaging in an argument that went nowhere, worrying about something I can't control. The goal wasn't to eliminate all yellow and red immediately. That's not realistic. But it was to become aware, because awareness is the first step to change. After a week of this audit, I saw patterns I'd been completely blind to. I was spending almost 2 hours a day in red zone activities. 2 hours! That's 14 hours a week of pure energy waste. So I started making small changes. I deleted social media apps from my phone. I stopped watching the news first thing in the morning. I set boundaries with energy vampire friends. I started saying, I need to think about it, instead of immediately saying yes to requests. And slowly, my baseline energy level started to rise. Things that used to exhaust me became manageable. I had bandwidth for creativity again. I could handle stress without falling apart. But here's the thing, most surprising discovery. The calmer I became, the more effective I became. People think you need to be intense, passionate, fired up to get things done. But the opposite is true. When you're calm, you make better decisions. When you're not burning energy on drama, you have more to invest in execution. When you're not constantly stressed, your brain actually works better. There's science behind this. Chronic stress literally shrinks your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, planning, and self-control. It enlarges your amygdala, the fear and emotion center. You're essentially rewiring your brain to be reactive and anxious. But when you manage your energy well, when you stay calm, the opposite happens. Your prefrontal cortex strengthens. Your amygdala calms down. You become smarter, more creative, more capable. I saw this play out at work. There was this project that was falling apart. Deadlines were being missed. Team members were blaming each other. Other clients were unhappy. Everyone was running around in panic mode, working 16-hour days, sending emails at 3 a.m. I decided to take a different approach. Instead of joining the panic, I took a step back. I went for a walk. I cleared my head. Then I came back and made a simple list of what actually needed to happen to get things back on track. While everyone else was having emergency meetings and sending novel-length emails full of finger-pointing, I quietly started executing. I tackled one task at a time. I communicated clearly and calmly. I didn't get pulled into the drama. And you know what? My part of the project got done. On time. With quality. While others were still having meetings about having meetings. The CEO noticed. He pulled me aside and said, "How are you the only person who seems to have their shit together right now?" I didn't have some secret productivity hack. I just wasn't wasting energy on panic and drama. That saved energy went into actual work. This is the silent advantage in action. While everyone else is burning their energy on noise, you're investing yours in signal. Look, I'm not going to pretend I've perfected this. I still have days where I get pulled into unnecessary drama. I still sometimes waste energy on things that don't matter. I'm human. But the difference now is that I notice it happening. And when I notice it, I can course correct. I can pull my energy back. I can redirect it to something that actually serves me. And that awareness, that ability to catch yourself in the act of wasting energy and choose differently, that's a superpower. Here's what I want you to take away from this lesson. Your energy is your most valuable resource. More valuable than your time, more valuable than your money. Because without energy, you can't leverage either of those things effectively. Start treating it like the precious resource it is. Stop giving it away to people and situations that don't deserve it. Stop letting other people's chaos become your emergency. Stop reacting to every little thing that triggers you. Instead, become ruthlessly protective of your energy. Guard it, conserve it, invest it wisely. Because when you do, something incredible happens. You stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like you're directing your life. You stop being exhausted by existence and start being energized by possibility. And people will notice. They'll see that you're different, that you're not getting pulled into the drama, that you're not falling apart when things get hard, that you have this steady, calm presence even in the middle of chaos. And they'll start to trust you more, respect you more, rely on you more. Because in a world full of people who are constantly running on empty, burning out, melting down, someone who has their energy under control is magnetic. That's the silent advantage. Not silence as in not speaking, but silence as in not engaging with the noise. Silence as in having the more discipline to say no to the energy vampires, so you can say yes to what truly matters. Master this, and you're already ahead of 90% of people. But we're just getting started. Lesson 3. The power of silence. Let me tell you about the most powerful conversation I ever had. It lasted exactly 4 minutes, and I said maybe 20 words total. I was sitting across from a potential business partner. We'd been negotiating terms for weeks, going back and forth on email, on calls, in meetings. He wanted a bigger stake in the company than I was comfortable giving. I wanted certain guarantees he wasn't willing to commit to. We were at a stalemate. So we scheduled one final in-person meeting. Winner takes all, or we walk away. He came in hot, prepared. He had a whole presentation ready. Charts, projections, comparisons to other deals. He talked for a solid 15 minutes, laying out why his terms were fair, why I should accept, why this was a good deal for both of us. When he finished, he looked at me expectantly, waiting for my counter-argument, waiting for me to present my case, waiting for the negotiation dance we'd been doing for weeks. Instead, I just looked at him. Didn't say anything, just maintained eye contact and breathed. 5 seconds passed, then 10, then 20. He shifted in his seat. So, what do you think? I took a sip of water, still didn't respond. He started filling the silence. I think if you really look at the numbers, you'll see that. And he started repeating points he'd already made, but with less confidence this time. His voice had a slight tremor that wasn't there before. I still said nothing. Another 30 seconds of silence. "Look," he said, and now he was definitely uncomfortable. "Maybe we can revisit the equity split. I might be able to go down to—" And just like that, he started negotiating against himself. Within 2 minutes of me saying absolutely nothing, he'd moved closer to my position than weeks of back and forth had accomplished. When he finished his revised offer, I finally spoke. "That works for me. Let's draw up the papers." He looked almost relieved. We shook hands. Deal done. As I walked out of that meeting, I realized something profound. In a world where everyone feels compelled to fill every silence, the person who can sit comfortably in the quiet has all the power. This is something most people never learn. We're taught from childhood that silence is awkward, that we need to fill empty space with words, that not responding immediately means we're rude or slow or weak. But that's exactly backwards. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is a weapon. And like any weapon, it's most effective when wielded with intention. Let me break down why silence is so powerful, because once you understand the psychology behind it, you'll start using it everywhere. First, silence creates discomfort, and most people will do anything to resolve discomfort. We're social creatures. We're hardwired to seek connection, to avoid rejection, to fill awkward gaps. When there's silence in a conversation, especially a tense one, our brains interpret it as a social threat. And when people feel threatened, they talk, they explain, they justify, they reveal. This is why silence is so effective in negotiations, in conflicts, even in casual conversations. The person who speaks first after a silence is usually the person who's less comfortable with the power dynamic. I learned this by accident years ago. I was in a performance review with a boss who was trying to lowball me on a raise. She offered a number that was insulting given my contributions. My first instinct was to argue, to list all my achievements, to make my case. But something made me pause. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was trying to formulate the perfect response. Whatever the reason, I just sat there looking at her without saying anything. The silence stretched. She started squirming. "Of course, that's just the initial offer," she said quickly. "We can discuss." And before I said a single word in my defense, she'd increased the offer by 15%. I learned something that day. Your silence makes people nervous. And nervous people make concessions. But it goes deeper than that. Silence also forces people to confront their own thoughts. When you're constantly talking, you're not really thinking. You're just reacting. But when you're silent, when you're really listening and observing, you're processing. You're seeing patterns. You're understanding what's really happening beneath the surface conversation. And when the other person is talking into silence, they start hearing themselves. They start noticing the weaknesses in their own arguments. They start second-guessing themselves. I have a friend, let's call her Emma, who's a therapist. She told me that one of the most powerful tools she has is strategic silence. When a client says something significant, instead of immediately responding with advice or reassurance, she just sits with it. She lets the silence do the work. And what happens? The client starts going deeper. They start unpacking what they really meant. They start having realizations they wouldn't have reached if Emma had jumped in with a response. Most people, Emma told me, don't need advice. They need space to hear themselves think. But we live in such a noisy world that we never get that space. So when I provide it through silence, they often solve their own problems right there in the room. This blew my mind because I realized I was doing the opposite in my own relationships. Whenever someone shared a problem with me, I'd immediately jump into fix-it mode, offering solutions, sharing similar experiences, trying to make them feel better. But I wasn't actually helping. I was just adding more noise to their already noisy internal world. So I started experimenting with silence in my personal relationships too. When my partner would come home stressed about work, instead of immediately trying to fix it or give advice, I'd just listen. Really listen. And when they finished talking, instead of filling the space with my thoughts, I'd let there be silence. At first it felt weird, unnatural, like I was failing at being supportive. But then something beautiful started happening. In that silence, my partner would often continue talking, going deeper, figuring things out on their own. And when they did reach a conclusion or solution, it was theirs. They owned it, which meant they were way more likely to actually implement it than if I'd just told them what to do. Our relationship improved dramatically, not because I became smarter or more helpful, but because I learned to shut up and give space. Silence is generosity. It's giving someone the gift of being heard without judgment, without interruption, without competition for airtime. But let's talk about the other side of silence, the strategic side, because silence isn't just powerful in supportive contexts, it's devastatingly effective in competitive ones too. Think about arguments. What do most people do when someone attacks them verbally? They defend. They counterattack. They match energy for energy. And what happens? The argument escalates. Both people get more entrenched in their positions. Nobody wins. But what if you don't engage? What if someone comes at you with aggression and you just don't react? I saw this play out brilliantly at a family gathering last year. My cousin Jake has always had this need to be the smartest person in the room. At dinner, he started going off on this political rant, clearly trying to bait people into an argument. Everyone else took the bait. They started arguing back. The dinner table turned into a debate stage. Voices got raised. People got offended. The whole evening was ruined. Except for my Uncle Tom. Tom just sat there, calmly eating his food. Jake tried multiple times to pull him in. "What do you think, Tom? Tom, you agree with me, right? Tom, don't you think that's crazy?" And every time, Tom would just look at him, smile slightly, and say, "Interesting," or "I can see why you'd think that," and go back to his meal. No agreement, no disagreement, no engagement with the fight Jake was trying to start. And you could see it driving Jake crazy. He kept getting more aggressive, more provocative, trying to get a rise out of Tom. But Tom wouldn't bite, and eventually Jake just gave up. He ran out of steam. The argument fizzled. Later, I asked Tom about it. He said, Jake doesn't want a conversation. He wants a fight. And I'm too old and too tired to give him what he wants. The only way to win that game is not to play. Silence is the ultimate refusal to play someone else's game. When someone is trying to provoke you, they need your reaction. That's the fuel for their fire. Without your reaction, the fire goes out. They're left shadowboxing against air. This works in professional settings too. I once had a colleague who would try to undermine me in meetings by asking loaded questions. Don't you think that approach is risky? Hasn't that been tried before and failed? Are you sure you've thought this through? My old response would have been to immediately defend my ideas, to explain myself, to prove I'd done my homework. But I learned a better way. When he'd ask these questions, I'd just pause, look at him, and calmly say, I'm confident in this approach. Then I'd move on. No defensiveness, no long explanations, no feeding into his attempt to make me look unprepared. And here's what happened. His questions started looking like what they were. Not legitimate concerns, but attempts to undermine. Other people in the meeting started noticing. They started seeing him as the problem, not me. My silence made his tactics visible and ineffective. But here's where it gets really interesting. Silence doesn't just affect the other person. It affects you too. When you're constantly talking, constantly reacting, constantly filling space with words, you're not really thinking clearly. You're in output mode. But output without proper input is just noise. Silence allows you to shift into input mode, to actually observe what's happening, to notice things you'd miss if you were too busy formulating your next response. I started implementing what I call silence breaks in my day. 5 minutes where I just sit and don't engage with any stimulus. No phone, no music, no conversation. Just me and my thoughts. At first, it was torture. My brain wanted to grab for something, anything. It wanted stimulation. But as I practiced it, something shifted. Those 5 minutes became the most valuable part of my day. That's when ideas would surface, when solutions to problems I'd been struggling with would suddenly become clear, when I'd have realizations about relationships or projects or myself. Silence is where insight lives, but you'll never find it if you're constantly drowning it out with noise. There's this concept in music called negative space. It's the silence between notes, and any good musician will tell you that the silence is just as important as the sound. The silence is what gives the notes meaning, impact, emotion. Life is the same way. The silence between your words gives them weight. The pause before your response gives it power. The space you create allows for depth. I started noticing this in effective communicators. The best speakers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who know when to pause, when to let a statement land before moving to the next one. When to let silence do the heavy lifting. Watch any great actor. They don't just deliver lines, they live in the silence between lines. That's where the real performance happens. Or watch a great teacher. They don't lecture nonstop. They make a point, then pause, letting students process. They ask a question and actually wait for an answer instead of filling the silence themselves. The power of silence is the power of restraint, and restraint is always more impressive than excess. Think about it. Anyone can fill time with talking. That's easy. That's the default. But holding back? Choosing your words carefully? Speaking only when you have something worth saying? That takes discipline. That takes confidence. And people sense that confidence. When you're not desperate to fill every silence, when you're comfortable in the quiet, you project a calm authority that no amount of words can create. I remember reading about a CEO who was famous for his long pauses in meetings. Someone would present an idea, and he'd just sit there thinking for what felt like an eternity. At first, people found it unnerving, but they learned that when he finally spoke, it was worth listening to. He wasn't reacting, he was responding with thought and intention. Compare that to leaders who feel the need to immediately respond to everything, who interrupt, who fill every gap with their opinion. They might seem engaged, but they're actually revealing insecurity. They're showing that they can't sit with uncertainty, that they need to be the center of attention, that they value speaking over thinking. Silence is confidence. It says, I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to fill space. I'm comfortable enough in myself to just be. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds manipulative, like you're playing mind games. And I'll be honest, it can be used manipulatively. Any powerful tool can be misused. But here's the thing. True silence isn't strategic. It's authentic. It's not about calculating the perfect moment to stay quiet, to gain an advantage. It's about genuinely not needing to respond to everything. It's about being so secure in yourself that you don't feel compelled to defend, explain, or justify. When silence comes from a place of inner peace, people feel it. It's not threatening. It's actually calming. It creates space for real connection and real understanding. But when silence comes from a place of manipulation, people sense that too. It feels cold, calculated, and it backfires. So the key is to develop genuine comfort with silence, to actually be okay with not talking, to truly believe that your worth isn't determined by how much airtime you get. This is harder than it sounds because we're conditioned to equate visibility with value. We think if we're not constantly contributing, we're not adding value. If we're not always speaking up, we're being passive. But that's not true. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is create space for others. Sometimes the most powerful move is the one you don't make. I'll leave you with this story. There's a famous Zen koan about two monks arguing about a flag. One says the flag is moving. The other says the wind is moving. They argue back and forth until a Zen master walks by. They ask him, "Master, which is it? Is the flag moving or is the wind moving?" The master says, "Neither. Your minds are moving." That's what silence teaches you. While everyone else is caught up in the movement, the noise, the constant need to react and respond and be heard, you can choose to be still, to be quiet, to be at peace. And from that stillness, you see things others miss. You understand things others don't. You have power others can't access. This is the silent advantage. Not the absence of speech, but the presence of intention. Not muteness, but mastery. Learn to be comfortable in silence, and you'll find a strength that words could never give you. Lesson 4. Trust in chaos. There's a moment that happens in every crisis. A moment where everything shifts from manageable to completely overwhelming. Where the problem isn't just big anymore, it's everywhere. And in that moment, you see exactly who people really are. Let me take you back to March 2020. You remember, the world was shutting down, pandemic hitting. Nobody knew what was going to happen next. I was working for a startup at the time, and within the span of 72 hours, everything fell apart. Our biggest client pulled their contract. Our funding round collapsed. Half the team was quarantined. The CEO was having a complete meltdown, sending all caps emails at 3 a.m. People were panic applying to other jobs. The company's Slack was just a constant stream of anxiety and doom scrolling. I was scared too. Of course I was. I had bills to pay. I had people depending on me. The future was this massive question mark that got bigger and darker every time I looked at it. But something interesting happened in the middle of all that chaos. I noticed people started watching me differently, asking me questions, wanting to know what I thought we should do. And the weird part? I didn't have any special knowledge. I wasn't more informed than anyone else. I wasn't some brilliant strategist with a master plan. The only difference was that I wasn't panicking. While everyone else was running in circles, sending frantic messages, having emergency Zoom calls that went nowhere, I was just steady. I showed up. I did my work. I spoke calmly. I acknowledged the uncertainty without adding to the hysteria. And that calmness in the middle of chaos became leadership without me even trying. This is something that most people don't understand until they experience it. When everything's going well, everyone can look composed. Everyone can seem capable. But when the walls start closing in, when the pressure gets turned up, when everything's on fire, that's when you see who's actually solid and who's just been faking it. In chaos, calm is magnetic. Think about the last time you were in a genuinely scary situation. Maybe it was a medical emergency. Maybe it was a natural disaster. Maybe it was a car accident or a sudden crisis at work. In that moment of panic, what did you do? You looked around for someone who seemed like they had it together. Someone who wasn't freaking out. Someone who could think clearly. That's hardwired into us. When we're in fight or flight mode, when our rational brain shuts down, we instinctively seek out stability. We want someone to follow, someone to trust, someone who makes us feel like maybe, just maybe, everything's going to be okay. And the person we gravitate toward isn't the loudest. It's not the one with all the answers. It's the one who's calm. I saw this dynamic play out over and over during those pandemic months. In every meeting, every decision point, every moment of uncertainty, the people who stayed calm became the anchors, not because they were smarter or more experienced, but because they could think clearly while others couldn't. There was this one moment that really drove it home for me. We were in a virtual all-hands meeting. The CEO was trying to rally everyone, but you could hear the panic in his voice. He was speaking too fast, contradicting himself, making promises he couldn't keep. And I watched the chat fill up with anxious questions and worried comments. Then one of our product leads, this quiet woman named Rachel, who usually never spoke up in big meetings, unmuted herself. "Hey everyone," she said, and her voice was steady, calm. "I know things are really uncertain right now. I'm scared too. But I've been thinking about what we can control, and I have some ideas I want to share." The chat went silent. Everyone stopped typing. She laid out a simple, clear plan. Nothing revolutionary, just practical steps we could take in the next week, the next month. She acknowledged what we didn't know, but focused on what we did. By the time she finished, the energy in that meeting had completely shifted. People weren't panicking anymore. They had something to focus on, someone to trust. Rachel didn't have a fancy title. She wasn't the CEO or a senior executive. But in that moment, she became a leader because she was the only person in the room who had control of herself. And here's the key insight. You can't control the chaos, but you can always control yourself. And when you control yourself, you indirectly control the situation. Let me explain what I mean by that. When everyone around you is losing their minds, your calm becomes a force of nature. It's like being the eye of a storm. The wind is still raging around you, but you're still. And that stillness starts to pull others in. They want to be where you are, because where you are feels safe. I started studying this phenomenon. I read about crisis situations throughout history, about leaders who emerged in disasters, wars, emergencies. And the pattern was always the same. The leaders weren't the strongest, or the smartest, or the most experienced. They were the ones who could stay calm when everyone else couldn't. Their composure became everyone else's compass. Think about Captain Sully landing that plane on the Hudson River. His plane had just lost both engines. He had seconds to make a decision that would determine whether 155 people lived or died. The co-pilot was panicking. Air traffic control was panicking. Passengers were panicking. And Sully? His voice on the black box recording is eerily calm. "We're going to be in the Hudson." Not frantic, not hysterical. Just matter of fact. Like he was commenting on the weather. That calm wasn't because he wasn't scared. He was terrified. But he'd trained himself to function in fear, to think clearly in chaos. And that training saved everyone on that plane. You don't need to be a pilot to develop this skill. You just need to understand that panic is a choice. Fear is automatic, that's biology. But panic is what happens when you let fear drive, when you give up control and let the emotion take over. Staying calm in chaos is about maintaining that control. It's about feeling the fear, acknowledging it, but not letting it make your decisions. I started practicing this in small ways first. Because you can't expect to stay calm in a major crisis if you fall apart over minor inconveniences. When I'd get stuck in traffic, instead of getting angry, I'd practice breathing. I'd notice the frustration, name it, and let it pass without acting on it. When something would go wrong at work, instead of immediately reacting, I'd pause, take a moment, then respond. When someone would say something that triggered me, instead of snapping back, I'd count to 10, sometimes 20. These tiny practices in low-stakes situations built the muscle I needed for high-stakes ones. And when the real chaos hit, the pandemic, the company crisis, the uncertainty, I had that muscle memory. I knew how to find stillness even when everything was falling apart. But here's what I learned that surprised me. Staying calm in chaos isn't just about managing your own fear, it's about managing everyone else's fear too. When you're calm, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping everyone around you. Your nervous system actually communicates with other people's nervous systems. It's called co-regulation. When you're calm, the people near you start to calm down too. When you're panicking, you make others panic. This is why parents learn to stay calm when their kids are freaking out. If the parent panics, the kid panics harder. But if the parent stays centered, the kid starts to settle. The same principle applies everywhere. In your workplace, in your relationships, in your community. I remember during those pandemic months, I'd get calls from friends who were spiraling, completely overwhelmed. And I noticed that if I matched their energy, if I got worked up too, the conversation would just spiral further. We'd both end up more anxious than when we started. But if I stayed grounded, if I spoke slowly and calmly, if I acknowledged their fear without amplifying it, something would shift. They'd start to calm down. Not because I said anything profound, but because my nervous system gave their nervous system permission to relax. This is the real power of calm in chaos. It's contagious in the best possible way. Now, let me be clear about something. Staying calm doesn't mean pretending everything's fine. It doesn't mean toxic positivity or ignoring real problems. That's not calm, that's denial. True calm comes from acknowledging reality fully, while refusing to be controlled by it. It's the difference between saying, "This is terrifying and I don't know what to do," which is honest but helpless, and saying, "This is terrifying and I don't know everything yet. But here's what I do know, and here's what we can do next," which is honest and empowering. During the company crisis, I wasn't pretending we weren't in trouble. We were absolutely in trouble. But I focused my energy and everyone's attention on what we could control, what we could do, what was possible, instead of spiraling into what we couldn't control. Every day, I'd ask myself and my team 3 questions. 1. What do we know for sure? Not speculation, not worst-case scenarios, just facts. This grounded us in reality instead of fear-based imagination. 2. What can we control right now? There's always something, even if it's small, even if it's just how we respond. Focusing on what we could control gave us agency instead of helplessness. 3. What's the next right step? Not the whole solution, not the master plan, just the next step. This kept us moving forward instead of being paralyzed by the enormity of the problem. These questions became our anchor, and slowly, step by step, we navigated through it. The company survived, not because we had all the answers, but because we didn't let panic make our decisions. Here's another thing I noticed. In chaos, people don't need certainty. They need confidence. You can't give people certainty because in a crisis, there is no certainty. Nobody knows exactly how things will unfold. Promising certainty is just lying with a smile. But you can give them confidence. Confidence that you'll figure it out. Confidence that you won't abandon ship. Confidence that even if you don't have all the answers, you'll find them together. And that confidence doesn't come from having a perfect plan. It comes from being unshakable in yourself. I learned this from watching my grandmother, actually. She lived through a war, a revolution, multiple economic collapses. She lost everything more than once. And yet, she was the most unshakable person I've ever known. I once asked her how she stayed so calm through all that chaos. She said, "When everything outside is falling apart, the only thing you can do is make sure you don't fall apart inside. Because if you can keep yourself together, you can help put everything else back together too." That's it. That's the secret. In chaos, your inner stability becomes everyone's foundation. Think about it like this. A building in an earthquake doesn't survive because it's rigid. It survives because it's built with flexibility and a strong foundation. It sways with the quake instead of fighting it, but it doesn't collapse because the core is solid. You need to be that building. The chaos will shake you. That's unavoidable. But if your foundation is solid, if you know who you are, if you trust yourself, if you've practiced staying centered, you'll sway but not break. And people will shelter in you. Not because you're the strongest or the smartest, but because you're stable. And in chaos, stability is the most valuable thing there is. I want to share one more story because I think it perfectly illustrates this principle. A few years ago, I was at a concert with some friends. Huge outdoor venue, thousands of people. Midway through, a storm rolled in. Not just rain, serious lightning, dangerous conditions. The organizers cut the power and evacuated. Immediately, chaos. Thousands of people trying to leave at once. No lights, rain pouring, people screaming, pushing, panicking, kids crying. It was genuinely scary. My group got separated in the crush. I found myself with strangers, everyone freaking out, some people hyperventilating. I could have panicked too. Part of me wanted to. But instead, I took a breath. I looked around. I noticed there was a covered walkway nearby that most people were running past. I spoke up, calmly but clearly. "Hey, there's cover over there. Let's get out of the rain and wait for this crowd to thin." A few people followed me. then more. We got to the covered area. I suggested we all turn on our phone flashlights so we could see. Someone had water and started sharing it. Another person had first aid supplies and helped someone who'd fallen and scraped their knee. Within 10 minutes, we'd created this little island of calm in the middle of chaos. People stopped panicking. We waited out the worst of the crowd crush, then made our way to the exits safely. I wasn't trained in emergency response. I didn't know any of these people. I didn't do anything heroic. I just didn't panic. And my calm created space for others to not panic too. That's the power you have in any chaotic situation. You might not be able to stop the storm, but you can be the shelter. You might not be able to fix everything, but you can fix yourself. And often, that's enough to start fixing everything else. So how do you develop this? How do you become the person who stays calm when everything's falling apart? First, practice in small moments. Don't wait for a crisis to test yourself. Build the muscle in everyday stress. Traffic, difficult conversations, minor setbacks. These are your training ground. Second, separate fear from danger. Fear is an emotion. Danger is a reality. Learn to feel fear without letting it dictate your actions. Most of the time, what we're afraid of isn't actually dangerous. It's just uncomfortable. Third, focus on your breath. Sounds simple, but it works. In any moment of rising panic, slow down your breathing. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. Your body can't be in full panic mode if your breathing is slow and controlled. Fourth, ask grounding questions. What do I know? What can I control? What's the next step? These questions pull you out of catastrophizing and back into actionable reality. Fifth, remember, someone has to be calm. Why not you? In every chaotic situation, someone will emerge as the steady one. You can choose to be that person. Not because you're special, but because you're willing. The silent advantage in chaos isn't about having all the answers. It's about being the answer to the question everyone's silently asking. Is anyone in control here? When you can calmly, truthfully answer yes. Yes, I've got control of myself, and that's a start. Everything changes. People trust you, follow you, find hope in you. Not because you're a superhero, but because in a world of chaos, you chose to be still. And that stillness saved not just you, but everyone around you, too. Lesson 5. Clarity of mind. You ever have one of those days where your brain feels like a browser with 47 tabs open, 12 of them playing audio, and you can't figure out which one it is? Yeah, me too. For years, I thought this was just normal. I thought everyone walked around with this constant mental noise. The to-do lists running on loop, the replayed conversations from 3 days ago, the worries about things that haven't happened yet and probably never will, the decisions you're second-guessing, the comparisons you're making, the scenarios you're planning for. I thought a busy mind was just the price of being an adult, of being ambitious, of caring about things. I was wrong. A busy mind isn't a sign of productivity, it's a sign of chaos. And chaos in your head creates chaos in your life. Let me tell you when I figured this out. I was going through what I'd call my hustle era. I was working a demanding job, running a side business, trying to maintain relationships, staying active on social media, reading all the right books, listening to all the podcasts, attending networking events, optimizing my sleep and my diet and my productivity. I was doing everything right according to every guru and success coach on the internet. And I was absolutely miserable. I couldn't focus on anything for more than 10 minutes. I'd start one task, remember another, jump to that, get distracted by an email, fall down a rabbit hole on my phone, and suddenly an hour was gone and I'd accomplished nothing. I was exhausted but couldn't sleep because my brain wouldn't shut off. I was constantly anxious about all the things I wasn't doing while I was doing other things. I felt scattered, stretched thin, like I was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Then, one Saturday morning, my laptop crashed, just completely died. And I didn't have the energy to deal with it right then, so I decided to just take a walk. No phone, no destination, just a walk. I walked for 2 hours. And something weird happened. My brain started to clear. All that noise, all those thoughts competing for attention, they started to settle. Like snow in a snow globe that's been shaken, slowly everything drifted down, and I could see clearly again. And in that clarity, I had this realization. I'd been confusing being busy with being effective. I'd been confusing mental noise with important thoughts. Most of what was cluttering my mind wasn't useful. It wasn't helping me make better decisions or take better actions. It was just there, taking up space, consuming energy, creating stress. I started paying attention to what actually filled my mental space. And I realized most of it fell into 3 categories. Rumination, replaying past events I couldn't change, having imaginary arguments, rehashing old embarrassments. Worry, catastrophizing about the future, planning for scenarios that would probably never happen, creating problems that didn't exist yet. Distraction, random thoughts, half-formed ideas, things I saw on social media, songs stuck in my head, things I needed to remember to do later. Out of all the thoughts running through my head on any given day, maybe 10% were actually useful. The rest was just noise. And that noise was costing me everything. It was costing me my ability to focus, my ability to be present, my ability to make good decisions, my peace of mind. Clarity isn't about having no thoughts. It's about having space between thoughts. It's about not being so cluttered that you can't think clearly when you actually need to. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to find an important document on your desk. If your desk is clean and organized, you can find it immediately. But if your desk is buried under piles of paper, old coffee cups, random notes, stuff you meant to deal with weeks ago. Finding that document becomes a project. Your mind works the same way. If it's cluttered with unnecessary thoughts, finding clarity when you need it is nearly impossible. I started experimenting with mental decluttering. Not meditation, though that helped too, but practical ways to clear out the noise. First, I did a brain dump every morning. I'd spend 10 minutes writing down everything bouncing around in my head. Worries, tasks, random thoughts, everything. Just getting it out of my head and onto paper freed up so much mental space. Second, I created systems for recurring decisions. What to wear, what to eat for breakfast, when to work out. I turned these into automatic routines so my brain didn't have to waste energy deciding them every day. Third, I cut down my inputs. I unsubscribed from newsletters I never read. I unfollowed social media accounts that stressed me out. I stopped consuming news first thing in the morning. I reduced the amount of information coming at me from all directions. Fourth, I practiced single tasking. One thing at a time, full attention. No switching between tasks, no checking my phone while working, no half listening to podcasts while trying to read. The results were shocking. Within a couple of weeks, I felt like a different person. My focus improved dramatically. I could sit with a problem and actually think it through instead of getting distracted every few minutes. My anxiety dropped because I wasn't constantly worrying about 12 things at once. My decisions got better because I had the mental clarity to actually consider options instead of just going with whatever felt easiest in the moment. But the biggest change? I could actually hear myself think. For the first time in years, I had access to my own intuition, to my own wisdom, to that quiet inner voice that actually knows what I want and need, but that I'd been drowning out with constant noise. Let me give you a concrete example. I was stuck in a job I hated. I'd been complaining about it for months. But every time I thought about leaving, I'd spiral into this tornado of thoughts. What if I can't find something better? What if I'm making a mistake? What if the next place is worse? What if this is as good as it gets? All that mental noise kept me paralyzed. I couldn't make a decision because I couldn't think clearly. After I started clearing the clutter, I sat down one quiet morning and just asked myself a simple question. If I knew I'd be okay no matter what would I do? The answer came immediately, clear as day. I'd quit. That clarity had been there all along, but I couldn't access it through all the noise. I gave my notice the next week. Best decision I ever made. But I could only make it once my mind was clear enough to hear what I actually wanted. This is what calm people understand that anxious people don't. Clarity is power. When your mind is clear, you see opportunities others miss. You make connections others don't make. You solve problems others can't solve. Not because you're smarter, but because you're not drowning in mental clutter. Think about the most effective people you know. The ones who seem to glide through challenges, who make decisions quickly and confidently, who always seem to know what to do next. I'd bet money they have clear minds. They're not carrying around 47 tabs of mental noise. They've learned to keep their mental space clean and organized. And here's the beautiful part. When you have clarity, you don't just make better decisions for yourself. You help others make better decisions too. Confused people create more confusion. They share their anxiety, their uncertainty, their noise. But clear people create clarity around them. They cut through the chaos and show others what actually matters. I saw this in a meeting last month. There was this huge decision the team needed to make about which direction to take a project. Everyone had opinions. Everyone was talking at once. There were 12 different ideas being thrown around, each with pros and cons, and the more we talked, the more confused everyone got. Then one of the designers, this guy named Chris, who usually doesn't say much, spoke up. "Can I suggest something? Let's stop for a second. What's our actual goal here? Not all the things we could do, but what are we actually trying to achieve?" Simple question, but it cut through all the noise. We identified the goal. Then Chris asked, "Okay, of all these ideas, which one actually serves that goal best?" Suddenly, the decision became obvious. We'd been drowning in options, but once we got clear on what actually mattered, the right choice emerged naturally. That's the power of clarity. It simplifies what seems complicated. It shows you the path when everything looks like a maze. But here's what you need to understand. Clarity doesn't just happen. You have to protect it. You have to actively defend your mental space from clutter. Because the world is constantly trying to clutter your mind. Advertisers want to fill it with desire for things you don't need. The news wants to fill it with fear and outrage. Social media wants to fill it with comparison and FOMO. Other people want to fill it with their problems and drama. And if you're not intentional about what you allow into your mind, it'll become a dumping ground for everyone else's noise. I started treating my mental space like I treat my home. I wouldn't let someone come into my house and dump garbage on my floor. So why was I letting people dump mental garbage into my mind? I got ruthless about boundaries. No more doom scrolling. No more consuming content that made me feel bad. No more engaging in gossip or drama. No more taking on other people's anxiety as my own. And I got equally intentional about what I did allow in. Good books, meaningful conversations, nature, music that elevated me, people who inspired me. Your mind is like a garden. Whatever you plant and water will grow. If you plant clarity, you'll get clarity. If you plant chaos, you'll get chaos. Now, let me address something. Some of you might be thinking, but I can't just disconnect from everything. I have responsibilities. I need to stay informed. I have people depending on me. I get it. And I'm not suggesting you become a hermit or ignore your responsibilities. I'm suggesting you become selective, strategic, intentional. You can stay informed without consuming news 24/7. You can meet your responsibilities without letting other people's urgency become your emergency. You can be there for people without absorbing their anxiety. The difference between a clear mind and a cluttered mind isn't how much you have to deal with. It's how you deal with what you have. A cluttered mind tries to hold everything at once. A clear mind processes one thing at a time and then releases it. A cluttered mind worries about 20 future scenarios. A clear mind focuses on what's actually happening now. A cluttered mind sees problems everywhere. A clear mind sees what actually needs attention versus what can be ignored. I learned this lesson powerfully when I became a parent. My daughter was born, and suddenly I had a million new things to worry about. Was she eating enough? Sleeping enough? Developing properly? Was I doing everything right? Was I scarring her for life with my mistakes? I could have drowned in that noise. Many new parents do. But I remembered what I'd learned about clarity. I focused on what was actually in front of me. Is she healthy right now? Is she loved? Am I doing my best with the information I have? Yes. 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 Okay, then everything else is just noise. That clarity saved my sanity. It let me be present with my daughter, instead of being lost in anxiety about the future or regret about the past. Clarity is a gift you give yourself, but it becomes a gift you give everyone around you, too. When you're clear, you don't add to other people's confusion. You help them find their own clarity. You become a steady presence in a chaotic world. People start coming to you when they're stuck, not because you have all the answers, but because your clarity helps them find their own answers. And here's the final piece of this that I think is crucial. Clarity requires space, and space requires saying no. You can't have a clear mind if you say yes to everything. If you're overcommitted, overstimulated, overwhelmed, clarity is impossible. Learning to say no to opportunities that don't serve you, to people who drain you, to obligations that don't align with your values, isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining clarity. Every yes is also a no to something else. When you say yes to that networking event you don't want to attend, you're saying no to time to think. When you say yes to scrolling social media, you're saying no to being present. When you say yes to other people's priorities, you're saying no to your own. I started saying no to a lot of things. And yes, some people were disappointed. Some people thought I was being distant or difficult. But the clarity I gained was worth it. Because with clarity, I could finally hear what I actually wanted and pursue it with intention instead of getting pulled in 12 different directions by noise. This is the fifth pillar of the silent advantage. Before you can be strategically silent, before you can stay calm in chaos, before you can respond instead of react, you need clarity. Clarity of mind is the foundation everything else is built on. Protect it. nurture it, defend it, and watch how everything else in your life transforms. Lesson 6. Confusing the opponent. All right, let's talk about something that might sound a little tactical, maybe even a little Machiavellian. But stick with me, because this isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding a fundamental truth of human interaction. People who can't read you can't beat you. Let me explain with a story. I used to play poker with some friends every month. Friendly games, not huge stakes, but competitive enough that everyone was trying to win. I'm not a great poker player. My card sense is mediocre at best. But I started winning consistently. Not because I was getting better cards or making brilliant strategic plays. I was winning because I'd learned something crucial. Everyone at that table had tells. Little habits that gave away whether they had a good hand or were bluffing. Mike would touch his chips more when he was confident. Rachel would talk more when she was nervous. David would go quiet when he had something good. But I'd learned to keep my face neutral, my body language consistent, my betting pattern unpredictable. They couldn't read me. And that unpredictability made them second-guess every decision they made against me. They'd fold when they should have called, because they couldn't tell if I was bluffing. They'd call when they should have folded, because they couldn't gauge my confidence. My steadiness became their confusion, and in that confusion, I had the advantage. Now, take that same principle and apply it to life, to negotiations, to conflicts, to competitive situations, to relationships, to career moves. When you're emotionally reactive and predictable, people can manipulate you. They know exactly which buttons to push to get the response they want. They can plan around you. They can use your patterns against you. But when you're calm, when you're measured, when you don't react the way they expect, you become a problem they can't solve, a variable they can't predict, and that unpredictability shifts the entire power dynamic. I learned this accidentally in a salary negotiation. I was underpaid and everyone knew it. I'd been at the company for 3 years, taking on more and more responsibility with minimal raises. So I scheduled a meeting with my boss to discuss compensation. I prepared all my arguments, my achievements, market data, everything. I walked in, stated my case clearly and calmly, and then said, "Based on all of this, I'm requesting a 30% raise." My boss leaned back, did that thing where he interlocks his fingers and looks thoughtful, and said, "That's quite a lot. You know our budget constraints. I'm thinking more like 10%. Old me would have immediately started arguing, defending, justifying. But I'd learned something by then. I just sat there, didn't say anything. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. He shifted in his chair. I mean, I could possibly go to 12%. I still didn't respond, just maintained eye contact. Calm, present. "Look," he said, and now. He was definitely uncomfortable. "Let me talk to finance. Maybe we can find room for 15%, and we can revisit in 6 months. I let him talk himself up to 18% before I finally spoke. "I appreciate you working with me on this. I'm going to need a few days to think about whether that works for me." I left. Didn't accept on the spot. Didn't negotiate further. just left him sitting with uncertainty about whether I'd even take the offer. 2 days later, he called me. I talked to finance. We can do 25%. Can we lock this in? I got more than double his initial offer. Not because I was an amazing negotiator, but because my calm, my restraint, my unpredictability made him nervous. And nervous people make concessions. This is the subtle art of confusing your opponent, not through deception, but through composure. When everyone expects you to get angry and you stay calm, you confuse them. When everyone expects you to defend yourself and you just observe silently, you confuse them. When everyone expects you to chase and you walk away, you confuse them. And confusion creates doubt. Doubt creates hesitation. Hesitation creates opportunity. I saw this play out beautifully with a friend of mine. She was going through a divorce. Her ex was trying to drag out the proceedings, being difficult about every little detail, clearly trying to wear her down emotionally. All their mutual friends expected her to be devastated, to be angry, to fight fire with fire. Instead, she was eerily calm. She responded to his emails with brief, professional replies. She showed up to mediation sessions, composed and reasonable. She didn't take any of his bait. He couldn't handle it. He'd try to provoke her, and she'd just not react. His lawyer started getting frustrated with him because he looked like the unreasonable one. Their mutual friends started seeing him differently. Within 3 months, he agreed to terms that were far more favorable to her than anyone expected. Not because she fought harder, but because her calm in the face of his chaos made him look unstable. And that instability cost him leverage. The person who stays composed controls the narrative. But here's where this gets really interesting. This isn't just about confusing people who are actively against you. It works in all competitive situations, job interviews, sales calls, even dating. Think about job interviews. What does everyone do? They come in eager, trying to prove themselves, answering every question thoroughly, hoping to impress. But what happens when you flip that script? When you come in calm, confident, asking as many questions as you're answering, making it clear that you're evaluating them as much as they're evaluating you. You shift from being the one who needs the job to being someone they need to convince. Same interview, different energy, completely different outcome. I did this in my last job hunt. I was desperate for work, bills piling up, savings running low. But I didn't let them see that desperation. I came into every interview like I was considering multiple options, which eventually became true because this approach generated multiple offers. I asked hard questions about their culture, their challenges, their turnover. I didn't oversell myself. I stated my value clearly and calmly, and then let them make the case for why I should work there. 3 different companies ended up competing for me. They raised their offers unprompted. They expedited their processes, all because I didn't act like I needed them more than they needed me. When you need something too much, when that desperation shows, you lose power. When you're calm about it, when you project that you'll be fine either way, you gain power. This works in relationships too. Not in a manipulative, playing games way, but in a healthy, I'm complete on my own way. The most attractive thing you can be to another person is someone who doesn't need them to complete you. Someone who's choosing to be with them, not clinging to them. When you're too available, too eager, too desperate for someone's attention or approval, you become predictable, and predictability kills attraction. But when you have your own life, your own purpose, your own peace, when you're genuinely okay whether this person is in your life or not, you become intriguing, unpredictable, valuable. I'm not talking about playing hard to get or being manipulative. I'm talking about genuine self-possession, about being so centered in yourself that you're not thrown off balance by someone else's behavior. The silent advantage here is that you're not trying to confuse people. You're just so steady, so self-contained, that you naturally become hard to predict. You're not reactive, so they can't manipulate your emotions. You're not desperate, so they can't leverage your needs. You're not transparent about your every thought and feeling, so they can't strategize around you. This becomes incredibly powerful in any situation where there's tension or competition. Someone's trying to bully you? Instead of getting scared or fighting back, you just calmly set a boundary and walk away. They don't know what to do with that. Bullies feed on fear or anger. Calm confuses them. Someone's trying to argue with you? Instead of engaging point by point, you just say, "I can see we disagree," and don't continue the debate. They're left shadowboxing with air. Someone's trying to guilt trip you? Instead of defending yourself or giving in, you just acknowledge their feelings without changing your position. I understand you're disappointed. My answer is still no. They can't guilt someone who doesn't feel guilty. Your composure becomes their confusion, and their confusion becomes your advantage. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This isn't about being cold or manipulative. It's not about playing mind games or trying to psychologically dominate people. It's about being so secure in yourself that you don't react from a place of need, fear, or ego. It's about being grounded enough that other people's chaos doesn't pull you off center. When this comes from a healthy place, it's not manipulation, it's maturity. Manipulation is when you're trying to control someone else's behavior for your benefit. Maturity is when you're controlling your own behavior for everyone's benefit. The confusion others feel isn't because you're being deliberately cryptic. It's because they're used to people being reactive, emotional, and predictable. Your calm is so unusual that they don't have a script for it. And here's the beautiful irony. The less you try to control others, the more influence you have. When you're desperate to control someone's opinion of you, their behavior toward you, their decisions, they feel that pressure and resist it. But when you're completely okay with however things unfold, when you're not attached to a specific outcome, people feel that freedom and are actually more likely to move toward you. I've seen this in leadership. The best leaders I've worked for weren't the ones constantly trying to control everything and everyone. They were the ones who were so clear and steady that you wanted to follow them. They didn't manipulate or coerce. They just created such a strong field of calm competence that you naturally aligned with them. That's the ultimate form of influence. Not force, not manipulation, just presence. So, how do you develop this? How do you become someone who naturally confuses opponents without even trying? First, work on your self-sufficiency. The more complete you are on your own, the less you need from others, and the less predictable you become. You're not reacting from need, you're responding from choice. Second, practice non-reaction. When someone says or does something designed to get a rise out of you, pause. Breathe. Choose a response that serves you, not one that satisfies their expectation. Third, develop genuine outcome independence. Care about things. Work toward goals, but hold them lightly. When you're okay with either outcome, you make better decisions, and you're harder to leverage. Fourth, keep some things to yourself. You don't need to share every thought, every feeling, every plan. A little mystery isn't dishonesty, it's wisdom. Not everyone needs access to your inner world. Fifth, be consistent in your inconsistency. This sounds contradictory, but what I mean is, be consistent in your values and boundaries, but don't be predictable in your tactics. Keep people guessing about your methods while being rock solid about your principles. The goal isn't to become some mysterious, untouchable figure. The goal is to be so centered, so self-possessed, that you're genuinely hard to throw off balance. And when you're hard to throw off balance, you're hard to beat. This is the final piece of the silent advantage. Your calm isn't just defense, it's offense. It's not just protection, it's power. Bringing it all together. So, here we are. 6 lessons that completely transformed how I move through the world. Respond, don't react. Take control of yourself so circumstances don't control you. Save your energy. Protect your most valuable resource from unnecessary drains. Harness silence. Use the power of the unspoken to create influence. Trust in chaos. Become the steady presence others anchor to. Cultivate clarity. Clear the mental clutter so you can see what actually matters. Confuse your opponents. Stay unpredictable through composure. These aren't separate skills. They're all aspects of the same fundamental shift, from being controlled by the world to being in control of yourself. And here's what nobody tells you about this journey. It's not glamorous. It's not flashy. There's no moment where you suddenly arrive and everything's perfect forever. It's a daily practice. Some days you'll nail it. Some days you'll slip back into old patterns. Some days you'll react when you meant to respond. You'll waste energy on stupid arguments. You'll fill silence with nervous chatter. You'll panic when you meant to stay calm. That's okay. That's human. The difference is that now you know there's another way. Now you have the tools to course correct. Now you understand that the quiet path, the calm path, the measured path, it's not the weak path, it's the powerful path. I wish someone had taught me this when I was 20. I would have saved myself so much unnecessary suffering, so many burned bridges, so many exhausting battles that accomplished nothing. But maybe I needed to learn it the hard way. Maybe you do too. Maybe the only way to really understand the value of calm is to experience the cost of chaos. What I know now is this. In a world that's constantly screaming, silence is a superpower. In a culture that rewards reaction, response is revolutionary. In an environment of chaos, calm is currency. The people who understand this, who live this, they're the ones who actually change things. Not through force, not through volume, but through presence, through clarity, through the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to prove itself because it knows itself. That's the silent advantage. Not silence as weakness, not calm as passivity, but both as choice, as strategy, as power. You have that power. You've always had it. You just might not have known how to access it. Now you do. So what are you going to do with it? The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who've mastered the art of being still in the storm, who can think clearly when everyone else is panicking, who can stay grounded when everything's shaking. It needs you, the calm version of you, the centered version, the powerful version that emerges when you stop letting everything else control you and start controlling yourself. That version of you, that's who you've always been underneath all the noise. Welcome home.